Welcome, Mr. Al Husseini, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today with us. You have one of the most difficult jobs, keeping up connectivity during these very difficult times in Palestine. Tell us how you're managing to do this.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So it's a very complex situation we're dealing with. We've been through this many times before, but it was more of a low-intensity combat. So if you remember the intifadas and what have you, this is the first experience we have in what we call a full-fledged war. The ability to succeed and to keep any form of communication stems from the realization that communication is today as important as food, as water, as fuel, and what have you. So if we were to write Maslow's hierarchy, connectivity is probably third or fourth. It's life-saving. It's how people find out where to move to shelter, where food is coming, check for loved ones. So the idea is you need to transform your mindset from providing a service as any other service to something that basically is in demand and is something that is vital on a daily basis. The second conviction is that as a regulator, as government, as operators, we need to throw everything aside, profit, regulations, rules, license requirements, and so on, and just focus on one thing, is delivering a service on a daily basis. So we're incurring heavy losses, operators are well into their budgets and burning a lot of cash to keep things going. Prices of diesel goes up. The third thing, which is also extremely complicated, is we need to understand one fact, is from the river to the sea, God decides the weather, Israel decides everything else. So you need to have an ability to put all differences aside, meet with them, and get approvals to get fuel in, to get equipment. And we do that on a regular basis, and we have to do it ourselves because my experience, no intermediary, no government, nobody has helped in the past 20 years. So this is something we have to do, and it is one of the few, I would say, corridors where the two parties meet almost on a daily basis to sort this out. The last thing I would say is that in time of conflict, communication is important for the two parties, stemming from two different interests. So you have to have the ability of basically getting the politics out of your head and focusing on what you do most. If they have another reason to do it, forget that, focus on your own people and how to save them. And this is basically how we do it. And so far, we've lost about 6 lives. And these are frontline people who move equipment from one side to the other side. Now, over the past 6 months, we've shifted to mobile cell sites. Most of the cells we had were decimated, so we assembled some of the equipment, pushed them in, and now we're moving with the refugees. Wherever they go, we kind of follow them. We're hoping the best will continue to do that.
Ali Yarhamun, and we're so sorry for your losses, and we are following the situation there closely. It's interesting that telecommunications come third after food and fuel. I mean, telecoms is of the utmost importance in a situation such as this. And you mentioned that it's very important to put profits aside and to focus on serving people. How do you do this? I mean, we understand that Starlink has set up some broadband services in the Palestinian territories. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, specifically in the West Bank and Gaza, our only connection to the world goes through the other side. So it is their decision, we're connected or disconnected. So we don't have our own access, and by definition, we don't have even a redundant line. So the idea, which was prior even to the conflict, was very simple. How if we ever get a blackout, what options do we have? We don't have many options. Our neighboring countries cannot do much. So the only other option was to go satellite broadband. And that also is a complex process of the qualification, the licensing, and getting the other side to approve it. What happened was that the Emirati government has a field hospital operating in the south of Gaza and Rafah. And they had received Starlink service via an agreement with SpaceX. As a regulator, I had to do something. They're not licensed. They are in my market operating. So the option was either shut them down or license them. A licensing process takes at least a year of work. So the decision was very simple, is to provide them with a permit, and we'll go case by case. So if they want to expand the service, they do it by permit. And now we're considering getting into an agreement and licensing SpaceX to provide the Starlink in all of the territories, because it's a strategic decision, is to see if we can get another way out without going. And this is basically going to be the disruption in the telco sector, satellite broadband, over the next decade. So each country has an entry point. Ours was, let's say humanitarian, but we're looking forward to building on this relationship.
It's an exceptional situation, and during these times, of course, you have to take decisions that may not be aligned with the types of decisions you would normally make as a regulator in terms of licensing. You mentioned putting profits aside and focusing on serving people. How do you convince the government to sometimes provide some free services?
So basically, I am the regulator, so I'm in between the sector and the government, and I need to balance the relationship. And essentially, in the case of today, look, people need the service. There is no money, nobody's making any income, so you have to provide service. In the beginning of the conflict, where our network was okay, we were providing what we call free credit, and people were calling. But as the network was starting to be taken out, we can only do a little bit of that. So I convened the companies and said, look, you're here for decades to come. We need to get out of this. And most of the companies are publicly listed companies, so it's a difficult decision for them. So I told them, convene your boards and come back to me. As a government, we have absolutely no money to help you, but license fees, frequencies that we will give you in the future, we'll look into what we can do. For the time being, this is what we'd like you to do. And if you refuse to do it, we'll tell you, we'll force you, we'll take over and force you to do it. But, we have good operators. Most of them are public listed. Nobody's going to complain. And I think this is something that we're all in, and if we don't get out of it together, there is absolutely no hope.
So you certainly haven't budgeted for war. You cannot budget for war. How are you going to fund your post-war recovery?
So what we'll do is two things. One is within the global domain of what they call, the recovery funds and so on. We will need to look at, pockets of money where we can compensate them. But we, as a regulator, I will not treat them as a health sector and so on. They are for profit and so on. So we will need to balance between how much they get in let's say, recovery grants and so on. We will facilitate low interest, long-term funding, and we will allow them to go back to the market and raise, because they're all public listed companies. So it has to be a combination of, some free money, some, low cost capital, and then they have to, raise more money from the market.
Let's talk a little bit about the sector and the future of the sector in general. What do you feel will be the most disruptive elements in the telco sector in the 10 years ahead, not just in the Palestinian territories, but internationally?
Given the backdrop of the Ukraine-Russia war and what's happening in the Middle East, clearly telcos is up there. My view is that satellite broadband is something we all need to look at very closely. It's now, kind of floating. There's no clear regulation. Business models are not very convincing, but billions are being spent. It's now led by SpaceLink. I think Amazon will come in, and I think other players will come in. What we've seen today is that there's a demand from the SpaceX Starlink service to get more licenses, start gathering the first customers. Nobody's going to make money out of this, but it's basically this is what we call first mover advantage. I think Amazon will come in next. Amazon has a more of, let's say, they have corporate services, so they can bundle the connectivity. This is something that Starlink does not have, so they need to figure it out. I think beginning will be basically where they'll be allowed to operate for, marine, aviation, off-grid. But as they, grow and get more customers, they will have to kind of come in on the consumer side. And there we're going to have issues, how to regulate them, make sure they don't have any dominant factor, see how we deal with the incumbents and the other operators. But my view is that the idea is to start seriously looking at this sector and start talking about how do we regulate this, what are the value propositions. Otherwise, we'll be caught off guard, and we have to then clean up a mess, basically.
Absolutely. We do have time for one question from the audience. If there is an audience question, we can take it. I'm sure there's a question from the audience.
There's one.
In the corner, yes.
Hi, thank you so much. Great talk, really interesting, and I'm really happy that we got to see this today. My question is related to investment. So obviously this event is one of the largest investment events currently. And I think telecoms is a rather ignored, let's say, segment when it comes to investment. So how do you see that now? Like, how would you see investment in the telecoms industry?
Were you able to understand the question? It was very quiet, your voice. So what are the potential investments in the telco sector? Do you mean in the Palestinian territories or globally?
Globally, in the Palestinian as well.
So in the conventional sector, I think investment will come through further consolidation in this sector. So we'll see, more and more companies, merge into, and we'll see like larger players and so on. And this will be driven by business logic and the reality on the ground, and basically people like SpaceX coming in, and the ability of these, whoever raises the money first. Another angle to this is a lot of investments may come from governments as in a protective type of motivation, So there'll be cash for that. The competition will come from basically the more innovative, typically and historically, market share was the main thing we always like to have as operators, Today, bottom line is what matters to investors, market share is something. So other people will look into the consolidation model. But my view is that there's investment that will always follow innovation and companies that are driven by consumer, innovation and so on. In the past, we used to own the customer. At the point, we found out that the device companies own the customer. Today, the customer is owned by the apps and they're free. So basically, you need to understand that telco is like your, baby. As a baby, it's something, as it grows up, it's something you have to let go. And investments will follow the more open-minded companies that are willing to let go and basically look at where, customer value is and the loyalty of customers. And then when you have that, you create avenues where you can take more money out of the purse. But I see investment coming in more consolidation, globalization, fewer companies will come. And also, as regulators, we need to make sure that we don't get into a setting where there's significant dominance.
Do we have another audience question? We have time for another question. I would like to know, yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to kind of diverge a little bit the focus in terms of what I see in the region. I come from Latin America, but I see that in Latin America we have had a lot of social issues in terms of refugees, blah, blah, blah. And I see a lot of the focus in the conference, and of course you as a regulatory person are focusing in terms of telecommunications and artificial intelligence and so on. But I see that there is like a time bomb in the region in terms of the social aspects that are in the neighborhood. And I don't see a lot of talk in the conference about how to tackle that. For example, the refugees in Latin America, it's happening. It's like an invasion that is getting into the U.S. and so on. And I see a lot of focus here in terms of environment. You know, when people talk about the ESG, they focus about that. Again, diverging a little bit about the specifics of your talk, but since you come from a place where, you know, some of these things are happening, how do you see the need to be proactive in terms of the social aspects that might at some point impact the investments, technology, and artificial intelligence?
So I'll answer from the niblets I heard. I didn't hear everything very quietly, but you're talking about social responsibility, refugees, and what can we do? It will differ on the situation. So there are refugees in Latin America that are different than refugees here. But on the basics of what companies can do, and we don't interfere in whatever social ESG the companies have, we encourage them and we leave them alone. But what's important is you need to make sure that they provided safety, food, shelter, what have you. And the ability to do that is basically you need to work with the international humanitarian agencies. So whether it's a purse where they can get food coupons. So first of all, you need to give them connectivity, and they have to have at least the most basic device, and you need to give them some airtime, some data. And usually companies will subsidize this. Aid agencies will come and subsidize this. So you'll get your coupon to get your 3 liters of water, your food package, medication, and so on. And you need to give them some time to connect with their family and so on. On the second part of this is you need to do some tracking services to see where they're moving, and then alert them. There's danger on this road, don't go there, and so on. So basically, you need to also keep them informed of what's going on. Aside from that, I don't think telcos can do much, and I don't think that telcos should be leading this. I think it's a broader community that should be part of it. But their safety, well-being, and providing whatever you can in terms of connectivity, where they can sleep, eat, and be taken care of.
How do you anticipate the telecommunications technology evolving over the next 10, 15 years?
So nobody knows. I mean, and it will be different in different places, because in many ways I believe it needs to be and has to be consumer-led, and consumers will vary. But I think there will be more pressure on the telcos and basically providing. So I'll give you an example. We cannot make voice over IP calls in many places within the region, but that's the trend everywhere. So I think one of the trends is we need to be more open-minded and allow it. If you deny something and you grow up, it will hit you harder. So the first thing you need to do is actually liberate the market. The telco market is different in the sense that they used to be the kings and the big. They are now another commodity. They hate when I say that, but believe me, aside from the brand, it's a commodity business. So I believe that we need to bring the operators down to the level and just basically say, follow the market. It should not be price driven, it should be demand driven, and where basically you need to offer value, not just the bandwidth. So I think the idea is that we need to create a new generation, open-minded kind of a telco business.
I want to thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for being with us, for sharing your insights, and we really appreciate your presence at this event, Mr. Al Husseini. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.